Welcome to another Faithful Question session, our first dual in-person and live stream Faithful Questions. Must admit the crowd here is a little bit light. They're probably forgetting that we have to start right at 7 o'clock, so we'll hopefully have more people coming in the next 3 to 5 minutes. But we will start the live stream as normal and go from there. Let's begin with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Heavenly Father, thank you for the technology that allows us to be brought together this evening on the internet, and that the pandemic has come to a place where we can have in-person gatherings. We pray that you continue to give us wisdoms to properly handle the remaining risks of the pandemic, and also to continue to worship you in all that we do. Help our young adults as they go out into the world on their own 2 feet, to know that you love them and you care for them deeply. We ask all of this through Christ our Savior, in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Welcome. Okay, so our topic for this evening is how can young adults keep their faith? Very specific reason I'm giving this talk today. You'll see I'm wearing my fresh UC Davis dad t-shirt. My son Gregory, who is behind the computers, is off to UC Davis this fall, and so I wanted to make sure I had a talk, not just for him, obviously, but for people like him who are going on their own for the first time, to some tips and tricks and trying to understand the risks that exist for them as they try to navigate the world and keep their faith strong. So let's jump right in. Overview for the evening. We're going to start before the intermission talking about the risks, trying to help young adults understand the things that are going to attack them, if you will, that they may not anticipate. And so we're going to talk about the being too busy and peer pressure and losing sight of what's the value of the faith, and then also as you grow older, your innocence about how things practically work goes away, and all of a sudden you see how the sausage is made, and there are times where you get frustrated with everything: your job, your school, your church, your family, all of these things. And that can lead to some distance if you're not careful. We'll have an intermission. Then after intermission, we will talk about how we can address these problems, how we can recognize that these risks are real, and how we can attack them to make sure our faith stays strong. So that's the plan for the evening. For all of you online, you do have a way to ask questions. So for you who are here in person, raise your hand. We'll come to you. We have a microphone. That way people online can hear you. We will also put you on camera here just so you can have the maximum amount of discomfort. But ask a question. We'll come with a microphone. But if you're online, the key here is to get logged in on YouTube. That way you can make a comment in the live stream video. We are monitoring those comments, so just start your comment with Deacon Question dash in all capitals, and then the question all in one comment, and we have people ready to read those questions, and I can answer them. If you can't get logged in on YouTube, and that should be easy enough, if you have a Gmail account, a Google account, a YouTube account, any Google-related account, you can use it to log in on YouTube. So if you have, that shouldn't be a problem. But if you don't, you've managed to avoid the Borg that is Google. You can go to deaconken.org/blog/chat and enter your question there. Use the same format, all capitals, Deacon Question. Last year, we had the ability to text message us at a special texting service. Nobody used it. I had to pay $4 a month for it. Decided to save myself a little bit of money with the kid going away to college. So that's no longer an option, but the two options still exist. Okay, let's jump right in. Risks for young adults. Let's start with being too busy. Every single person has something competing for their time. It doesn't matter if you're a rural person or an urban person, if you're young, if you're old, if you have a family, if you're single, if you're a priest. Everybody has things that are competing for their time. And frankly, we have to prioritize and choose. What's interesting, the more I've talked to people and met with people, we don't always choose for ourselves. So there's really two things that define what we do. One is where we have enough willpower to prioritize and say, this is what I want to do. But actually, a lot of the time, we are induced by the people around us, and sometimes in ways that we recognize but aren't happy about. With the kids in their various sports leagues, they say, you'll be at this practice at this time, and if you don't, your kid doesn't play. So that ends up influencing you to go to things that you might not otherwise think are all that valuable. And this happens at a formal level with things like leagues and clubs and all of that, but it also happens at an informal level with your friends. So at the simplest level, it's what you have the will to do versus what other people are inducing you to do. Now, as a kid, your parents are inducing you. Your parents are a big part of that, of saying, no, you're going to school right now. No, you're going to church right now. All of those kinds of things. With you being a young adult, now you're on your own. Now it's up to you to start making these decisions, and you can't count on the often very good, gentle guidance of your parents to help be a positive inducing factor in your life. The other half of this risk is it's easy to pretend we don't have as much control as we think we do. We'll do it tomorrow. The Mexicans have the phrase mañana. It's kind of not just means tomorrow, but also just a general, we can get to it eventually. And we'll say, we'll go next time, or in a few times, or someday. And what happens when you have that kind of attitude is it's amazing how quickly you reach a point where all of a sudden it's 10 years later and you didn't make any changes. You just kept not doing the things that you said you wanted to do. That you've basically been lying to yourself for years, thinking, I'm going to do it, and then never actually doing it. And this happens to all of us. It's happened to me many, many times. There are woodworking projects that should have been done decades ago that I've never finished. It's just part of the natural part of life. What we are aiming for is some realism about, I made the right choice. That is the thing that had to be dumped, versus things that we do think are important end up not being treated as important because we say, we'll get to it later. I wanted to give you an example of how sometimes false busyness comes into play. And I wanted to use something that high schoolers and early college kids would probably understand. You have a tough homework assignment, and you're sitting there at your computer, your desk, whatever, you got your textbook open, and it's just taken forever. You keep getting little pings from your phone, a tweet from somebody you follow, a text message from a friend, and you keep being interrupted. And really, that if you focused, this would take an hour or two, but it's 3, 4, 5 hours later, and you still haven't made good progress. And you finally have to say to yourself, no, I'm taking this phone, I'm turning it off, I'm putting it in the other room, I'm going to actually focus and get it done. And only then are you able to make good progress. And that whole time we weren't making progress, we were kind of deluding ourselves that we didn't have control, that we didn't have the ability to stop this, when all we needed to do is, in this particular case, get rid of our phone. So what I'm trying to say is, don't fall into those kinds of traps. Recognize you can set your own priorities, and you can choose to do things like put the phone aside, make a priority to go to Mass, what have you. So be really aware of those subtle ways others are redirecting you and your life and influencing your priorities, perhaps in negative ways. The next topic I want to talk about is peer pressure. Friends are obviously a big influence on all of us. They're an influence on us from where we're little children till the day we die. And that can be good. They can be very positive influences. But we do need to remember that sometimes the priorities they have don't align with the priorities we have for ourselves. And so they'll discourage you from doing things that they don't value, right? And this isn't even to say that it's intentional or proactive, but just in subtle ways. Like, hey, it's Sunday morning. You want to go get brunch? Right? It's, nothing wrong. It's a perfectly normal, fine request. But if you're someone who's trying to make it to Mass every Sunday, that is a slow little nibbling at you that you have to have the willpower to say, nope, Sunday mornings I go to Mass. Or, you know what, I really want to go to brunch, so I need to make a commitment in my life that I'm going to go to Sunday evening Mass or something like that. But these kinds of things happen in very normal, subtle ways, and we have to be aware of them. So one of the big peer pressures we get is time, and it's almost in a positive way. It's people want to do things with you, want to hang out with you, and you have to pick what's your priorities. Another one that's going to come your way is ideology. Now, this is one I think actually will surprise most of you as you go from high school into adult life. In high school and below, I think there's a general, we're still figuring things out. We're not forced to make our own decisions. And so we're much more likely to let the people around us just be who they are, and we are who we are. But at least for me in particular, when I got to college, that was the time when we started figuring things out. And how do we figure things out? We talk to our friends. We challenge them. We ask them, that doesn't make any sense. Why are you thinking that? And kind of going through this mapping process of deciding what is really important to us and what we believe. And what that means is when they disagree with you, unlike before where they might just kind of let it slide, I think you'll find as you get older, more and more of your friends are going to challenge you ideologically than in high school and for sure in middle school. And I don't actually think this is a bad thing inherently, but the pressures are real. It is a good thing that people are trying to figure out what they believe, and it's a good thing to have healthy discussions about all of that. But it's going to be a pressure that's real in your life that you'll have to manage. Okay, big change in the risks that exist. And I call this the why does it matter? This kind of goes along with the time thing, but it's really actually a bit of a different thing. You'll be wondering, why am I doing this? Why am I doing that? And so you'll start to ask yourself questions like, well, what's the purpose of Mass? Why do I go to this if I'm not getting anything out of it, or at least I feel that way? Why should I go to confession? I can just, tell God that I'm sorry. Isn't it only important that I believe? And your brain is naturally going through these very reasonable, normal questions, and you just have to, think them through. And it's very natural to not dig to the bottom, to leave it at a surface level. And there's actually one thing that can be really damaging, and that is much of what we do that has value is very difficult to measure in single increments. It's very hard to say what I got out of value of going to one college class, or one time going to Mass, or one workout session at the gym, or. You can't tell on a single level, but we tend to want to judge it on an individual level. I was remarking as my kids have been growing up, I ask them all the time, what did you learn at school today? And the answer is inevitably, nothing, we just reviewed stuff, over and over and over again. But you know what? Somehow, despite the fact that in no day I ever asked them they learned anything, they now know calculus, they now can do all of these things. And I actually don't think they were lying to me. I think you just don't appreciate on a single day that you learned all that much. Same kind of thing goes for going to church. What did I get out of this Mass? It's a little hard to say. But I can more rightly say, what did I get out of going to Mass every week for the whole year? How did it help me grow in my faith? All of those kinds of things. So don't let those questions of, I can't tell myself what I got out of this, stand in your way. And I really want to drive home the point that actions and habits mold us. Thought, it only goes so far. If you want to look at the person you are in 20 years, It's the actions and habits you developed starting 20 years before. Of these are the things of what I've done and who I've become. Just thinking about it doesn't really do it. And so this is where if you really do care about your faith, you can't just say, oh, I believe and that's enough. No, you have to have the habits and the actions to follow through on that. The last thing, last two things, I wanted to talk about that are risks out there. And this is related to the what does it matter question, is having unduly of a personal focus as opposed to an outward focus. The famous quote from John F. Kennedy is, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, right? We need to, and I think that principle can apply to everything, to your school, to the world, to your country, and to your church. We should stop asking ourselves the question of what is the church doing for me? What is God doing for me? What is Mass doing for me? Which is effectively a selfish question, and learn how to turn that around. Because actually, to use another great person's line, it is in giving that we receive. And so actually when we turn outward, when we treat Mass and church and school and work, not as opportunities for us to receive something, but as for us as opportunities to contribute, we actually end up getting more out of them by doing that. So try not to have this kind of receptive personal focus. Instead, try to have an outwardly focus. What can I do that is good for the world? As opposed to what can the world do that's good for me? All right, the last area, and it's a two-slider here. Church failures. If you have any delusion in your mind that this church of ours is perfect and unblemished, let me be the first to disabuse you of this illusion. We have an ugly, messy, difficult church. It is not the church of God because us humans have done such a great job taking care of it. It is the church of God because God has saved us from ourselves time and time again. And so you are going to find priests who are ornery and not very nice, poor organization where they can't do something very simple, even though they should be able to, not having the funds and constantly asking for money, being dominated by different communities, particularly in the retired set because they have more time to push and navigate. And you will be disappointed. There will be moments where you're going to say, this church is just getting underneath my skin and I can't take it. And that makes most people very reasonably want to say, well, why am I a part of this garbage? Why am I interested in being a member of such a pathetic organization? And the reality is because it is not we are a church of perfection, but we are a church of sinners. And it is a way, and we have to find our way through that imperfection towards God. There's a great quote from Woody Allen. He says, I would never join a club that would allow a person like me to become a member, right? Recognizing that a great club has wonderful people in it, but if you think about it, well, am I good enough to be a member of a club that's got wonderful people in it? That's what the church is in a nutshell. The church is a home of people who recognize we're not perfect, and therefore we don't behave perfectly. And nor are any of you watching perfect. It's just the nature of things. And for what it's worth, nor is any other organization in the world. No government, no church, no club, no advocacy entity. No matter what it is, they're all imperfect. So don't let the imperfections of the church stand in the way. It's fine to be frustrated. It's fine to fight against it. But recognize it's just the way of the world. This is not a case of the church getting worse or something like that. From the very beginning of the church, we've had problems, and we will continue to have problems till the very end. Okay. Coming up on the intermission, we will have a 5-minute intermission. Before we get there, particularly for those of you online, we will have a Q&A just after the intermission. And you guys are actually about 2 minutes behind us. When I speak right now, it'll take you about 1.5 minutes for you to see it on your computer screen. And even if you type really fast, it's going to be another 30 seconds before it gets back to us. So what you should do is, if you're going to get a quick snack at home, something like that, enter your questions that you may have now, then go get your snack, go to the bathroom, whatever you need to do, and then come back. And that way, after the intermission, we'll have the questions queued up, and we can get to them. For everyone in person, we'll just ask in person when the time comes. Reminder how to do it if you're online. Get logged in on YouTube using any Google account. Do the Deacon Question dash. If not, you can go to deaconken.org/blog/chat. Okay, we will see you in 5 minutes. All right, welcome back. Straight into Q&A this time. I'll have the things up here. Any questions that anybody would like to ask in the room, and then we'll go to do we already have questions online? All right, we'll go with the online question first.
Jessica Araza asks, something that has been conflicting for me in navigating Catholicism in young adulthood is navigating my personal beliefs and values when they are contrary to church teachings. How does one navigate that?
That is an excellent question, Jessica. And I think I have one or two slides that touch on that just a little bit. But what I would say is the key in this space is, one, understanding that this is very, very normal. It is very rare to run across a person who believes every single little aspect of every corner of church teaching. I have things myself that I struggle with. Now, as a deacon, it's very important that I have a poker face about this, because my job as a deacon is to be a representative of the church. But there's nothing wrong with you saying, I'm struggling with X, Y, and Z. That doesn't mean you're not welcome in the church, because if that was the case, it'd be like that Woody Allen quote, there'd be nobody here. Some suggestions. Go to confession and say that you're struggling with this. You don't even have to say, I've fixed that. You can just say, this is a tough topic for me, and I'm struggling with it. Next, don't be afraid to continue to dig deeper into the faith. I do have a slide later about how the faith we are taught as children is pretty juvenile, and it's not the fullness of the truth. And there's often nuance in what we believe that is, when we get older, much more comforting. We realize that, well, as long as you allow me caveats X and Y, then that's not so bad. So I would just say continue to learn, continue to research, treat it as a okay, normal thing that you are struggling with but never give up. Never give up on trying to understand where the church is coming from, and never being afraid to say, this is something that I will just keep working through. I'll keep confessing it, that it is something I struggle with, and maybe someday it won't be an issue for you anymore. But what I'll tell you is, you solve the two that you got right now, you'll probably pick up a new one after that. So, very normal. And don't be too hard on yourself, but don't get, what's the word I want to look for here? Don't get stubborn about willing to keep trying to understand. Have some humility to say, I don't understand. I'm not denying that I don't understand, but I'm not perfect. I don't know all the answers to everything. It might be that there's something I'm missing here, and I need to have a mindset of openness. So that would be my suggestions. Any questions from here? We're all good. None of them want to be on camera, I think. All right. Any other from the community? Nope. Okay. All right. So next half here is talking about how we're going to solve these problems, how we're going to combat these risks that exist in our faith. The overall goal of all of these is about making God and the church a priority in your daily life. That's how you keep your faith. You keep your faith by making it a priority. And so much of these suggestions is about not letting your faith slip away because you just kind of stop going. When I talk to people who come back to faith later in life, and I talk to a lot of them, that is the number one, if you ask them, well, what happened? Every once in a while there's some significant story, something sometimes very sad. But more times than not, it's just like, I don't know, I went away to college, and then I moved to Phoenix for a job, and I was on Anchor, and I stopped going to Mass, and then next thing I knew, I didn't really have a faith. So much of what we're going to deal with is talking about ways we can keep the church active on a daily basis. And that means setting priorities, working on making yourself a better person, and working on serving God in the world, being outwardly focused. So let's start with the really simple. Going to Mass needs to be something that you decide to do and you are committed to doing, full stop, end of story. Get the list of, when you move or are out on your own, get a list of the Mass times of every parish in the area so that you know, here are the 18 options within a 15-minute drive. And that way when your friend does ask you to brunch, you can say, ooh, I can go to the 12:30 at St. George's, or maybe I'll go to the Vigil Mass at St. Rose. You'll know all the various options. So get all the times. There are more out there than you think, and make it a commitment that I am going to figure out which one I'm going to go to, and I'm going to go. So what I would say is, before you have any other weekend plans, put a mark on the page. Say, my initial plan is I'm going to go to 9:30 at St. Clair. That's the plan. Now, that doesn't mean you can't change it, but when somebody says, hey, let's go to brunch, you can say, oh, that conflicts with my plan, my already pre-decided plan to go to Mass, and so therefore I need to find some other time. Either that, or if I can't find some other time, because maybe I work all afternoon or something like that, I'll have to say, oh, I'm sorry, I can't go. There's nothing I can do to rearrange my schedule. But if you can find a way to rearrange, okay, I'll go to the evening Mass at St. Clair or whatever, then sure, you can make a change. So it's not about being inflexible, but it's just getting it on the calendar, make sure it's something that if it needs to move, it actually moves, and making it a priority. And I would say, if you move, make sure you restart this habit right away. Don't give yourself the excuse of, oh, moving so hard, and oh, starting a new job is so hard. I'll get to it in a month. No. First week out, maybe you give yourself 1 week. I'm not saying we have to be overly harsh about this, but top of the priority list is, no, let's get this habit reestablished. Let's find my parish. Let's go dig in. Related to that is, Mass can get boring if it feels the same all the time. But the great news about the church is, we have this seasonal system called the liturgical year that keeps it fresh. And so do your best to get excited about the church year. Really celebrate Advent and Christmas, Lent and Easter. Do things like decorating your apartment, get a teeny little Christmas tree or whatever, or anything you can think of that makes it so you are really actively participating in these ongoing things. So it's not just the same Mass week after week. It's Advent now, and that's a fresh and new thing. And later it's Easter now, and that's a fresh and new thing. And then during the rest of the year, we have special saints' days and stuff like that. So do what you can to keep things lively by taking advantage of the fact that the church Mass really isn't stagnant. Kind of along those three lines, Lent has, and I've talked about in some of my other talks, has 3 disciplines: prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. Those are 3 wonderful tools to use throughout your life of, what am I doing in those 3 spaces? What am I doing in my prayer life? What am I doing in my areas of self-denial? That's what fasting is, of saying, no, I'm going to have discipline in my life, and I'm going to make sure I am not selfishly minded, but willing to deny myself to do other things. And then finally, almsgiving is the outward growth of that, giving money, time, effort to helping others. And what I say about it with Lent is, again, make it a pattern. 1 year do one thing, 1 year do another, or each year find one of each. See how you can do that in your own life, of even when it's not Lent. Okay, how am I moving in these 3 spaces? How am I changing things? The final thing I would say, and I think you're in your top 5% if you're really working on this, go to your holy days of obligation. There is really only 3 days that really are outside normal holidays, because Christmas and New Year's Day you kind of get for free, if you will, right? You're going then anyway. So all you got to come up with is August 15th, November 1st, and December 8th. And just the fact of having that commitment and making it a serious commitment in your life will keep you connected to the church. It'll be one of those things that reminds you that I need to keep faith as a proactive priority, and there's certain times where it needs to be on the top of the heap. even for an unusual way. Continuing down the keeping things fresh perspective, there are so many different ways you can change your faith life if you feel it getting dull. Because it happens to all of us, and not just in our faith. You know, people will have a hobby, and all of a sudden they'll get dull, so they have to kind of change it up or pick a new one. There are lots of different parishes. If you're not doing well at your current parish, think about a change. There are lots of different ministries you could be involved with. There's lots of different Catholic communities. And most notably, there's lots of different forms of prayer. Don't rely on the types of prayer that you learned as a child. Now, if they're working for you, keep them. But you'll find as your life evolves, you'll need different forms of prayer. So let's say your family was a big rosary family. You prayed the rosary every night. Wonderful. But maybe when you're 22, saying the rosary by yourself at night doesn't have that family connection that it did when you were 16, and it just feels like a slog to get through it. Well, try something else. There's lots of different types of forms of prayer. Because if you don't switch it up, eventually you'll just quit the thing that's a slog. So don't be afraid to try new things, different times of day, different places, going different places to pray, with different communities. And a big one, as I said before, turn off that phone when you're praying. Don't let your tweets and text messages interfere with your prayer life. All right, a huge one, and I think it is very disappointing to me that this isn't pushed more. When you started going to confession, you were 7 years old. We did it when you were 7 because we were receiving communion at the same time, or close thereto, 6 months to a year later. And part of the gateway of communion is you need to be able to go to confession if you've done something that would prevent you from going to communion. So we tie those two things together from a sacramental logic that no, if you can receive communion, we need you to be able to go to confession, because if you have something to confess, we want you to be able to do it before you receive communion. So they go together. But the reality is, very few 7-year-olds have something meaningful to confess. I hit my brother, kind of stuff, which is not nothing, but let's be honest. And as you, I'm sure, realizing as a young adult, chump change in the things that can be going on in an adult life. And the reason this can be a problem for you as a young adult is you have failed to make the transition in your own mind about what the nature of confession is. For your mind, it's about saying 3 stupid things you did to your brother or your sister or whatever. It's not about honestly talking to God about how you aren't the person you should be. And at young adulthood is probably one of the most important times in your life as far as stumbling and making mistakes. We get into our 40s and 50s, we've kind of smoothed things out a little bit. We still have our problems, but we've gotten on a little bit more solid footings. Early 20s, that's when you're making your big mistakes, right? That's when you're trying drugs when you shouldn't. That's when you're doing all those things that later in life, if I were to make a big list of everything I regret in my life, there'd be this big bubble somewhere between about 18 and 25. And so confession is a great gift when you're that age. So I would say, reinvestigate in your own mind what it means to go to confession and understand the beauty of this wonderful sacrament. I have a whole different Faithful Questions talk about confession, so I'd encourage you to consider watching it. But it is a wonderful sacrament, kind of like our friend Jessica who asked a question earlier. It's a wonderful sacrament when you're struggling with something. And it could be either disagreeing or it could be your own actions. That this is probably not right, but I haven't found the willpower not to do it anymore. Confession is a gift. It is a way to help you feel connected to God and connected to your church, even as you're struggling with those things. Whereas without the confessional, you're much more likely to give up. To say, I can't seem to fix this, so never mind. I must not be a good Catholic. I'm out of here. But that's not what our faith is. Our faith is a struggling faith. It is a through the mud, difficult process. And so the confessional is a way for us to continue to fight through the mud, to find a way to, over time, so that when we're in our 40s and our 50s, we say, yeah, that was tough when I was 25, but I found my way through it. So make good use of the confessional. I don't actually suggest this much generally, but I think for people who are newly on their own, go once a month. Make a commitment to go once a month. Normally for adults, I say 4 times a year. Twice independently and 2 times, once in Advent, once in Lent, when they have a penance service at the parish, which most parishes have. So that's, I think, a good balance for adults who aren't struggling with one particular sin that they really need to work on. But I'd say for young adults, I would shoot for monthly. I would shoot for the commitment to going once a month to talk to God about where you're struggling and asking for his help, asking for his forgiveness and pardon. On the complete other end of the spectrum is volunteering. It is such a good thing for our lives to go out and do good work in the world. It keeps us connected to good kinds of people. It helps make the world a better place. And it, again, turns us from that kind of inward focus where we're asking what people can do for us to an outward focus of how we can make the world a better place. And there's a ton of different ways to volunteer. Everything from just doing a mass ministry, like being a lector or an altar server, or, well, probably not anymore an altar server since we're dealing with young adults, but Eucharistic minister, anything like that. Or there might be some program at the church, like faith formation, that needs teacher's assistance or something like that. And then, of course, there's all the charitable options. You can go help the poor. You can help in the hospitals. If you really want to go to the deep end of the pool, you can minister in prisons. That one takes a little bit of training and expertise, but it's a wonderful ministry. And here's the thing. It doesn't even have to be a Catholic organization, because Christ didn't say, go feed the poor to make them Catholic. He said, go feed the poor because they're hungry. And if it happens to be a secular organization that's going out and feeding the poor, and you are helping them, you are not helping them as a secular person. You are helping them as a Catholic. So you are acting out your faith even if the work is being done through a secular organization. So it doesn't even have to be I have to do it at Loaves and Fishes, right? It could be at the Placer Food Bank. Also give money. Now, because so much of our priority set is defined by our money. Now, obviously, as a young adult, you're not sitting on huge sums of cash, but little warning for you throughout your entire life, you're never going to feel like you're sitting on huge sums of cash. Sorry to break the bad news to you, but that's how it is. But just making it a priority. When you go to Mass, give them $2. You know, I mean, if that's all you can afford. Maybe you can give them $5. I don't know. If you can give them $20, all the better. But make it a priority that you should be giving a little something to the church, to the poor, to, when there's a GoFundMe for an appropriate charitable cause. So, even if you're only talking about $100 or $200 a year, just the act of making that a priority in life is one of these things that turns us into a good giving person. And being a good giving person brings us closer to God. It reminds us of the value of our faith. It reminds us that our faith is not just something in our head, but something we do. It has a whole bunch of benefits. So I really encourage you, go volunteer. Do it at your church. Do it in the community. Give money as appropriate. And again, it's not about how much. It's about the commitment, about the idea that you're doing it. All right, next one is a big one. Find your faith community. And let me be quite clear. I did not say find your parish. Find your faith community. These are the people that you talk to about your faith. Now, for a lot of us, when we go to Mass, we get there 6 minutes early if we're lucky. We sit down, we pray, the liturgy goes, We go on our way out. Maybe we get a donut on the way out the door. But really, there's no community there. It was far too much of a siloed event from actually interacting with people. The closest you got to interacting with them pre-pandemic was shaking their hand and saying, "Peace be with you." That's not community. Community is people you actually interact with, care about, know what's going on in their life. And all of us need a faith community. And so what that generally means is you need to find some sub-community within the parish or some church or some faith community that's not tied to any one parish. But you need to find something that is your faith community. Faith is not an individual sport, it's a team sport. Something to suggest. Our diocese website has a list of about 25, and they're generally associated to one parish or another, but not all of them, young adult ministry groups. Not youth ministry, not high school, separate from that, young adult ministry. So look into it. I know here in Roseville, there's actually 3 or 4, if you include Granite Bay and Lincoln and whatever, that are in this area. And actually only 1 or 2 of them are associated to a parish. If you're at college, all the public colleges here in the Diocese of Sacramento have a Newman Center, and that's not only a place to go to Mass, but a place for community. If you go to some college that doesn't have that, like a private school that's not a Catholic school, maybe they have a Catholic club or something like it. Online communities can supplement this too. I would be cautious about it being your only sense of Catholic community. Real community is not just on your phone. Real community is personal. It requires handshakes and hugs, right? So it can supplement. You can use an online community to supplement, but it shouldn't be the sole area. I would say one of the best places to go look, though, is in your ministry community. If you volunteer at Loaves and Fishes, you'll get to know the other people who volunteer when you volunteer, and they will become your friends. Those kinds of things is where you can find good community. Or get involved in a ministry at your church, like being a lector. You'll get to know the other lectors during training, things like that. And don't be afraid to form one yourself. My wife and I ended up in a little community that actually was kind of out of the high school she worked at. That one of the teachers there was also Catholic, and he wanted to get together families that had young children. And so that we were invited in. There were 5 or 6 families. Had nothing to do with anything. We just got together for dinner every month or 2. And made some great lifelong friends out of that group. The godparents of my children come from that group. But it was in no way like some official group through my local parish. It was just Catholic people at a church, at a school, teachers at a school, and then they kind of reached out to the next of kin, so to speak, of who knew each other. So don't be afraid to be creative and form your own. Kind of along those lines, here's some suggestions of once you're inside the community. Because one of the things that's frustrating is there's certain communities out there that are a real community, but they don't know how to behave like a community. They just, the lectors here at St. Clair never get together for dinner. They probably should. So they don't always have to be religious activities. You can just go bowling as a group. And so I would say that when you find that community and you start getting together, start suggesting things. Hey, let's go out to dinner. Let's go bowling. Let's, go skeet shooting. Whatever you want to do. You can make whatever you feel like. Coming together to pray. Going to Mass together. I think actually this is probably one of the best. If you're fearful of not attending Mass, I think the best thing you can do is to find somebody who's going to go to the same Mass as you are and say, "Oh, I'm going to sit by you." Because think about that when you're lazy in the morning, you don't want to get out of bed. You're like, "Oh gosh, it was a late night last night." You're just going to say, "Nah, forget it. No Mass. I'll see if I can make the evening one." But if you know that Bobby is going to meet you there, and Bobby's going to be like, "Hey, what's the deal? You said you were going to meet me," you're much more likely to get out of bed. So making commitments to go with somebody else to church, to make it a group thing, even if it's just one other person, will get you out of bed and get you there. All right, One of my biggest things that I love, I think it is a completely underused thing in the church, baptism anniversaries. And I talk about this in a number of different talks in different ways, but actually my son and I were sitting down and talking about how you could, because baptism anniversaries are great when you're a kid. You tell your parents, hey, my baptism anniversary is in 2 weeks, I want some cupcakes, you know? and in our family, that's exactly how it goes. We have a little mini celebration on every one of their baptism anniversaries, and the kids know it's their day, and they bring it up, kind of like their birthday, except smaller. And so we were thinking about, it really is a great thing, but it doesn't work easily in a young adult community. And we were talking about how, you know how it is with birthdays. You pretend you don't want anybody to know, but then actually you kind of want the word to get out so that your friends will end up doing something for you on your birthday. There's this little subtle little game that's played. And you can play, and it works very well, frankly. Everyone figures it out and it works. But it's not going to work with a baptism anniversary. Nobody's going to say, ooh, we should do something because it's Gregory's baptism anniversary. So I think this is a case where this has to be where you're in a position within a community to suggest the idea of saying, hey, we did this as kids. It was awesome. We should do something like this as a community. Let's get everybody's baptism anniversary, put it on a little chart. We got name, phone number, email, baptism anniversary. And then we'll do something, and the people who like that person will be the drivers. I think that'd be a wonderful idea for like a Newman Center, that was like something they did on a regular basis. Or even if you don't find that ability to do it in your local community, maybe you use it yourself as an opportunity to connect with your faith in a special way. Even just something as simple as calling your parents. Hey, Dad, it's my baptism anniversary. I figured I'd give you a call, say hi. Let me tell you how things are going here at college. Hint, hint. Gregory in the back is laughing. Or even something like using it as an excuse to go on a weekend retreat or camping or something, and do something that is something that rebuilds your faith, right? All right, final thing of community suggestions, field trips. Get your group of friends together and go do something faith-related. Go see a monastery. We got Vine up outside of Chico. We got convents. You go visit a mission. Maybe if a bunch of you haven't been to the cathedral and done the tour of the cathedral, do that. Get together as a group to do something kind of fun, field trippy. All right, a few more items. I'm doing good time-wise. This is a toughie. This is one that people really struggle with. Dating. And that's just in general true, but particularly what it means as far as your faith. All of this stuff I talked about community, having people in your life who reinforce your faith, not tear it down, is obviously a good and important thing. And think who the tightest community you're going to have in your life. It's your significant other. They're the person who most is either connected to your faith or most pulling you away from your faith, even if they're not intending it. If you date somebody who's Catholic, you can go to Mass together, you can pray together, you can encourage each other in your faith. If you date somebody who's not Catholic, when they want to go to brunch on Sunday, it's like the friend who's pulling you away from your faith. Even again, at the most subtle of ways. I'm not suggesting bad motivations here. They're just not interested, particularly, in building up your Catholic faith. So dating somebody in the faith is a very good thing as far as this community aspect. The other half of it is, and I know sometimes young people like to forget this, but a big part of dating is leading towards marriage. Now, obviously, you're starting out college. Maybe you're not looking for that soon. I'm not saying it has to be the purpose of every single date. But some point in your life, you are likely going to click with somebody you're dating, and you're going to end up on the path to marriage with them. And that's a good and wonderful thing. And as I've talked about in many of my other talks, it is a really good idea, if you care about your own faith, to marry a Catholic. Now, I want to be completely clear. The faith of our church says it does not say it is mandatory to marry somebody of the same faith. The Catechism, paragraph 1634, I'll let you read it on your own time, says it's a challenge but not an insurmountable one. And it is allowed, but it gives a big list of problems that go along with it. My thinking is, marriage is hard enough without adding a few more insurmountable challenges. Surmountable challenges. Make your life easy for raising your children, for going to church, for all of these things. Marry a fellow Catholic. Your life will be better because of it. And I mean that in a true sense. Is it absolutely required? No, it isn't. But it will greatly enhance your faith. And if I look at the people that are coming to Mass who have active families in the church, for the most part, 75, 80, 90% of them, both spouses are Catholic. It makes a big difference. It's very, very hard to have a strong faith life while at the same time having a spouse who doesn't share that faith life. So when you're dating, you're playing a big risk when you date somebody who's not of the faith, because love hits when it hits. And if it hits in a way where you feel very emotionally, appropriately connected to someone, but they're not Catholic, that is a burden, again, not an insurmountable one, but a burden you will carry with you for the rest of your life. So I really encourage you to consider, for the most part, trying to keep your dating life within the faith. It'll help you in a moment in that you will be helping your community aspect, that you'll have people in your life who are helping you grow closer to the faith, not pulling you away from the faith. And it will be putting you on the right track to hopefully marrying someone of the same faith. So I know that's a tough one to hear, but I do think it's an underappreciated reality. You want to be compatible with the person you marry, and faith is a huge part of what makes you compatible. All right, final big point. Keep learning. Jessica, I think this one is really for you. What you learned in your sacramental prep classes and the other faith formation classes you took as a child was really pretty juvenile. It was not the fullness of the faith because you were young. You weren't ready at that time for it, or at least most of your class wasn't ready for it, even if you were. And so, it makes sense that was true, but somehow for so many of us, we don't really grasp that truth. And so we feel like, I was taught the faith. No, you weren't. You were taught a juvenile version of the faith. And so as we become adults, we need to mature our faith. We need to recognize they probably didn't talk much about sexuality or life issues or politically charged issues because, by the way, there are parents behind these kids who are not going to be happy if you're teaching all the 8-year-olds these things. So now it's your job as a young adult to do the difficult work of looking at the faith in a much more mature fashion. So, and again, you don't have to solve these problems all at once. This is something you can work at over time, but just make it a part of your life. Just like somebody who loves golf is constantly learning about how to have a good golf swing and the rules of the game, and they're constantly working on learning as just part of the joy of the hobby. If you want to be serious about your faith, you need to be doing the same thing, constantly learning a little bit more about certain saints and about the theology and about the practical matters of Mass, and constantly growing, but doing it now at a mature level, not a confirmation class level, which is really actually quite juvenile. So, go to classes at your local parish or do something online. Watch all of my Faithful Questions videos and thumbs up them. Read books, articles, go to Bible studies. And I would note on this one, although I wouldn't prohibit you or suggest you not ever go to a Protestant Bible study, make sure you understand when you're going to one, you are viewing the faith through a little bit of a different lens, and you probably want to be supplementing that with some Catholic teaching to understand how we would view some of those things differently. Another one, as kids, they tend not to pay attention to homilies at church and the sermons because they're over their head. And I think that habit sticks with you. You just learn that that's 10 minutes you can tune out. Now that you're older, actually those homilies are probably going to mean something to you. So pay attention to them during Mass, even if the priest has, doesn't do the best job delivering it. And actually, here's an interesting note along those lines. I have found that some of the worst delivered homilies, if you listen really, really carefully, have the best nuggets of truth. But you have to look at it really hard to find it. Because the truth is often there, but it's just not delivered all that well. And sometimes I've found that priests who don't deliver them well actually work really hard on their theology. They just haven't worked really hard on how to deliver it well. So I would say almost treat it like a challenge. I know there's something good hiding in here, but Father Stumble just doesn't very good at it. So let me see if I can't figure out what Father Stumble is trying to say. Okay, conclusion reminders. First of all, same thing as before. I'm going to have some concluding remarks, and then we'll have Q&A. But for all of you online, get those final questions in now, because by the time I get through all of the final slides, it'll be too late. You got a 2-minute head start. Take advantage of it now. Same thing as before. Get logged in on YouTube. If you can't, go to deaconken.org/blog/chat. Okay, conclusion. Start this in a little bit of an interesting way. Would you be convicted if you were put on trial for being a Catholic? Would there be enough evidence to convict you? That might be a question you want to ask yourself, once a month as you are developing in your own world. Are you really Catholic? Because if there's not enough evidence to convict you, you might want to have a little heart to help yourself of, what do I really believe? Do I really believe this or not? Because if I really believe this, there should be some evidence of that belief in my life. So ask yourself that question. If I was put on trial, would there be enough evidence to convict you of being Catholic? We must make our faith a part of our daily lives. Prayer, weekly Mass, learning, faith communities, service, all of these things need to be a part of the cornucopia of our lives. And we do this by participating in the church both formally and informally, that our good habits build on each other, that our good actions help us grow, and all of these things, just through the small actions day after day after day, eventually lead us to holiness and peace. But we have to keep working at it. We have to keep committed. We have to make it a priority. It can't be something that we just say, oh yeah, I want to do it, but this weekend's no good. And so hopefully everything I've said will help you, give you some ideas and tools on how to make sure that happens. Okay, satisfaction survey. Actually, it just went up at 8 o'clock on my blog. The satisfaction survey for today went online for all of you online, so go ahead and fill that out online. In person, we have forms here. Hand a couple of them out so we can get the one at the door if you haven't gotten one. I really find feedback valuable. Am I too loud? Am I too quiet? Am I not enunciating? Are the slides poorly organized? Was there connectivity problems? And so just take the 2 minutes to answer that. Tell me how things were. If you were on the YouTube video itself, if you hit the show more under the description, there is a link to the survey itself. This one is actually not in there, but it is if you go to deaconken.org/blog. We have a second survey that I do at the beginning of each year, although we didn't do it during the live stream only year, which is I want to know what you guys want from Faithful Questions in this upcoming year. So I have a big list of topics I'm considering. I have a list of live stream only topics that I did in the last year or two, with asking for those who come in person if we'd like to see them in person as opposed to just the online one. And other questions like that. How important is that we bring back refreshments? How important is that we bring back childcare? So please fill out that survey as well. As I said, you can go to deaconken.org/blog, or you can follow this full link here, or if you're in person, they're at the door. Speaking of future in-person features, whether we will have refreshments, That'll kind of be based on how much people really want it. It'll depend also on the current COVID situation and also whether I get any volunteers to help with it. I would also like to eventually re-add childcare. These refreshments and childcare are things we had in the past, but again, based on results of the survey and volunteers. So help fill out that survey to let me know. Speaking of which, volunteers. I'm losing one of my key team members to college. I need a couple more people, like on a rotational basis, to help with live streaming. It's actually really, really easy. We will train you. If you're at all willing to consider helping with that, please email me at ken@deaconken.org. And for the other in-person things of purchasing refreshments or helping put them out or keeping them refreshed during, or childcare, I do need support with that as well if we're going to do them. So for any of those, if you are willing to volunteer, please let me know, ken@deaconken.org. Or if you know me some other way, catch me after Mass, whatever, we'll make it work. Okay, next time, the topic is, what does the church teach about vaccines? That'll get them coming, right? They're obviously a hot topic right now. What's the story on vaccines? There's a lot of information out there that is hard to sort through. So I'll do my best to explain not just the COVID vaccines, but all vaccines and all of the various concerns and risks that go with them. There's actually a lot of nuance here, so there's a lot to learn. So that's the September topic. That will be September 14th. That's a Tuesday as well. Second Tuesday of the month, as always, at 7 p.m., either on YouTube or here in person. I'm going to wait for the results of the survey before making the rest of the 21-22 calendar. So please fill that out. You will help drive what we do. And if you have a topic that's not on there, please let me know. I'm always looking for topic suggestions. My additional information, I give this every time. DeaconKen.org is my blog. Ken@DeaconKen.org is my email. YouTube.com/DeaconKenCrawford. It all makes sense. It all should be pretty easy. Go figure it out. Final piece, YouTube subscribing. I'm up to 159 subscribers. Thank you to all of you. I really would like to get to 1,000. Only 841 more to go. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. If you have like 4 different email addresses, please subscribe 4 times. It really helps get visibility to the channel. It helps get features through YouTube that I wouldn't have otherwise. I hate asking for it, but it matters. And with that, we're on to questions. We'll start with online. What do we have? Nothing. The big nod, no. Anything from in person? We're all good. Okay, well, when that happens, we don't have to let the timer click all the way down to 25 minutes to nothing. We can finish with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us together tonight, for the many ways that you bless us. As we go forth, help us to remember that a strong faith is an act of the will. It requires that we put that faith into action so that the fruits of that faith will continue to build our faith. Help the young people who are listening today or will watch this later to understand how much they are loved and how much a strong faith will make their life better. We ask all of this through Christ our Lord and Savior. Amen. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful evening, and we will see you next month.